everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our live PPC Grader, clinic here. We're going to be talking about uh, are you acing or failing in terms of your AdWords performance? And to do this, we're going to be having a real interactive presentation here today. We'll be doing some live account assessments for real live AdWords accounts. And we've got an exciting agenda for you today. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Larry Kim. I'm the founder of WordStream, and we're the provider of PPC management software that includes an interesting thing called the 20-minute PPC Workweek. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Sam Owen. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself here?
Thanks, Larry. So I work over at Hannafin Marketing, and I write for the blog PPC Hero, if any of you guys out there read that. I've been working in PPC for about 4 years now. I manage both PPC and CRO, so that's conversion rate work, looking at landing pages, that kind of thing for Hannafin. And yeah, so that's me.
Great, thanks, Sam. And listeners, I happen to think that ppchero.com really is like the best PPC blog out there, like in terms of like the focus on PPC and everything you ever needed to know about paid search. If you're not already subscribing to that, I would highly recommend that. But let's just move on here. So as we were saying earlier, we'll talk a little bit about Sam's take on PPC optimization, why it matters, and his process. And then most of the time today will be spent today actually auditing PPC accounts. And hopefully by watching Sam and I go through these accounts, it'll give you a good indication of like how to do these types of critical reviews of AdWords accounts and try to figure out possible red flags and that kind of stuff. So before jumping into that audit, I just wanted to mention that we're having a hashtag for this webinar presentation today. It's ThinkPPC. So if you just include that hashtag in your Twitter tweets, then you can kind of chat along with us. I think Megan is going to be monitoring that. And also, if you have questions, you can take a look at the question box there and just type them in there, and we'll get to them in the presentation. All right. So before doing the audit, let's just ask a couple questions to the audience. We've got to get a sense for who's out there today. So our first question for the audience is, what area, in terms of the stuff that you do in your PPC account, what takes the longest for you to optimize? And I think the poll's open, so while the answers are coming in, Sam, I was just wondering, what do you see as the biggest time suck in terms of your day-to-day work?
So it's obviously one of those questions where I'm trying to think, like if I'm doing one big block of optimization, it's very different for if I'm thinking about how much I have to do throughout the year. So depending on the tools, etc., we have with the account, bids is a big part of it if I don't have a bid automation software helping on an account. But I think if I'm trying to set up like a really good keyword audit and go through, that's probably individually the toughest thing to set up, just in terms of like one-off time. And then ads is always one of those things. If I want a good strategy for setting up ads, then I'm going to have to revisit it every week and write some new copy. And I'm not a particularly ad eloquent person, so that's kind of tricky for me because I have to kind of get my creative juices flowing to write good ad copy. So that's where I see it. What about you, Larry?
It's the keywords still for me. Let's see what our audience has to say on this matter. Megan, could you see what our survey says? And it's the keywords by narrow margin, followed by bids. And if you add keywords and negative keywords together, that's even more. But it's a pain of all around. And I think we have just one more question. So if we could launch poll question number 2, please. The question is, how long have you been involved in search marketing? And of course, we'd love to know kind of how many years of experience people have here to get a sense for who's on the call today. And I know, Sam, you mentioned you've been doing PPC for 4 years now. Is that right?
Yep, so I started over in England straight after I graduated and moved over to the US a couple of years ago. So pretty evenly split between a couple of years in the UK and a couple of years in the US. But I'm firmly in that C camp right now. How about you?
Too long. I was like an advertiser back in 2001, so if you can believe that. So uh, back then, funny story. If you spent $1 million on paid search per year, which isn't all that much these days, they would fly you in to Mountain View to meet with the CEO of Google, and like they would, you know, return your calls and stuff like that.
So
Now
you've got
it's
your early connections.
but now it's a little harder to get their attention. Um, so, um, so yeah, let's see what our audience has to say here. So we've got it looks like a kind of a bimodal distribution of kind of new people and more senior people. That's great because we're going to have something for everyone here. All right, so Sam, do you want to take it away here a little bit? Talk about your views on PPC optimization?
All right, so I just kind of wanted to frame this discussion today, and apologize, these slides are a little stupid, but I think we're trying to get the point across. So you have to ask yourself the question, why is account optimization key? So it's the same question as why do you brush your teeth, why do you pay your bills, why do you put gas in your car? It's because it's necessary, and also because it feels kind of good. So just one of those things that you really have to do, even though it's not necessarily always something that you want to do. Now, in terms of optimizing your account, so there are a few important things that we wanted to highlight. So first, identify your key metric. Obviously, things like click-through rate or quality score might be important, but if it's cost per conversion, if it's the number of conversion, number of sales, how much revenue you make, you always want to have that at the forefront of your mind whenever you're auditing, because that's what you're working towards. Then recognizing how important quality score is to everything. So this is kind of up for debate, but I think it's still kind of one of those indicators in an account. So something we still look at for sure. Keep in mind that different metrics are going to affect one another. Obviously, if you improve click-through rates, it's going to affect how much you're paying for keywords. It's going to affect your overall cost in your account. CPAs are going to change. So you just want to be aware of that everything in PPC is kind of interlinked. And then up and to the right, this is just a phrase we use, but as long as everything's going up and to the right, that's why we optimize, keep things ticking along, make things a little better every week. That's kind of one of those key things you want to work to as well. And then this is the guiding formula of PPC that we like to talk about in our office. So spend over CPC times conversion rate equals leads. And really what we're looking at here is two of these metrics, so CPC and conversion rate, because these are the two that we can work on. So CPC, we can improve click-through rates, we can change bids. Conversion rate, we can look at our landing page, we can write better ad copy. So these are all the things that we can really improve, and then at the end of the day, it all kind of adds up to either how much we spend or how many leads we're bringing into our account.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam, for that overview. So now let's just jump in. We're gonna take a look at these two accounts today. I tried to pick two accounts that were a little different in terms of their size and their industries. Let's jump right in here. Sam, can you see that report on your screen there?
I can. Can you zoom in a little bit, maybe, or?
Yeah. I'll just do this thing here. How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah, it's a little better. I wonder if you can make it a little wider just so everyone can see it. But
okay. Well, it's a little zoomed in, so it's going to be a little pixely, but hopefully that's okay. All right. So let's audit some PPC accounts. Get to work here. So basically, what you're looking at here, it's an actual it's an actual person's account. One of a volunteer's account. They wanted us to do an audit for their account, and what you're looking at on your screen here, it's essentially kind of a report card that we've generated, and this is using the AdWords Performance Grader, which is a free tool which is offered in partnership with Hennepin Marketing and WordStream, so you can access this free audit tool on either site. But basically, we're just going to walk through this particular report and try to get a sense for what the heck's going on here, areas to improve, or areas that things are doing well. This particular account, he's a kind of a smaller company. It's a European company, I think, based in Denmark or something like that. And basically, they're doing translation services. So, Europe, they've got lots of different languages. So you need to translate, official documents from one language to another. That's kind of their core business. At a high level, I see that they're spending around 1,800 euros per month on average, and that's roughly, $2,500 US dollars. And we're just gonna kind of walk through various key performance metrics of this particular account, starting with kind of this notion of wasted spend. And so here in the audit, what we're doing is we're just trying to get a sense for how actively the advertiser is trying to proactively stop their ads from showing up from irrelevant keyword searches. And the way we do this is we just kind of look at the negative keyword activity in the account, how many negative keywords were added in the last month, and in the last quarter, 97 in the last quarter, 18 in the last month, just kind of get a sense for, like, are they actually, not every click on your paid search ad is going to be relevant. We find that, anywhere from 5 to 40% of it is potentially junk searches. And so that's why it's important to be really targeted. So he's kind of in the middle here. Sam, any thoughts on this particular metric or the concept of negative keywords in general?
Yeah. So I mean, the numbers you have there, it's probably very specific on the number of keywords you have in the account to start with. How many broad matches, how many phrase matches, what percentages exact, etc. So if your account's mostly exact, then you're going to have less negatives in there. The things I like to look at for wasted spend in general, so there's two things I look at. One is obviously the number of negatives in there, going through the search term reports, making sure we pull out every piece of data that looks like it's potentially irrelevant. And then the other is where I'm bidding too high. So we have something called a cost to conversion threshold, and essentially what we look at is, like, where am I bidding, or where am I paying for a keyword, say over 90 days, more than 4 times what my CPA target is. And then I'll run a filter in AdWords and pull those keywords up. And then even if those are broad matches, then I can dive in and look for negatives to add. I can look to change bids down. So that's kind of the approach. Negatives is definitely an important part of it. I also like to, so it's interesting when we look at negatives because there's a couple of things here too. I like to use a lot of what I call embedded negatives, and I just use those to make sure that my traffic is funneled to the right place. So if I have a couple of campaigns with similar-ish keywords, I like to put the keywords from the first campaign as negatives in the second campaign. So I don't know how that would kind of skew if you were to pull one of my accounts into the greater Larry. It would probably look like I had a lot more negative keywords than I do, just because of the way I like to kind of shape my traffic.
No, it would be fine because you're more advanced, and so the way this grade works is that it's kind of grading you against your peers. So it's grading these based on, like, other companies in that industry of that size, and so you probably use those advanced tactics, but other, like, large companies might also be leveraging those advanced tactics. So it kind of works itself out in the end. But yeah, I think totally. I think you're dead on the negative keyword stuff here. Sam, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but if for me, it's like when I'm doing these audits, if I only had like 5 minutes to work on something or 10 minutes, and I can only pick one thing to do in terms of like a quick hit, like I just want to make a small impact for this week or whatever, but I need to do it fast, I'd spend it doing negative keyword research. Any thoughts on that?
So I think bids is probably where I go first, and then the search term report second. So I just like, if there's anything, yeah, it's pretty much the same. If there's anything crazy going on in the account, just watch out for those broad matches that might kind of run amok or whatever.
Of course, agreed. So moving along here, this report outlines a couple of different key performance metrics. The next one on the list here is quality score, which is sort of Google's impression of how your click-through rate is doing primarily relative to what they think your click-through rate should be. And so, the benefit of this quality score or the penalty of the quality score has to do with, if you have a above average quality score, you can actually get better exposure and lower cost per clicks, and the reverse is also true. If you have below average quality scores, you end up paying more for your clicks and you get worse exposure. So this is in this graph, what I've done is I've kind of looked at all the keywords in this guy's account and totaled up the impressions, like where are the ad impressions happening? Are they happening for quality score keywords of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And just try to get a sense for what that distribution looks like, because it's not, typically you've got all sorts of different keywords in your account. Some of them are doing great, some of them are doing not so great. So you want to see kind of what does that distribution look like as a portfolio of keywords. And so the green bars on this graph, they have to do with the the quality score distribution for this particular account, and the yellow curve kind of shows what's kind of more typical or recommended for this type of company at this stage of spend. And so his average quality score is a little bit on the low side. It's 2.6, so that's going to be below the average of like 5.1. So as a result, I think there's probably some stuff we could be doing here. Any thoughts, Sam?
So for this account specifically, I wonder if language is playing a role in low quality score here, because I know he has keywords in different languages because it's a translation service. So I wonder if perhaps there's keywords in one language with ads in another, with a landing page in another, possibly. Or there's some kind of disconnect going on there that Google is looking at and seeing that perhaps the quality score could be low.
So I think you've got some fantastic insights there. You're actually correct. So I'm able to see a little bit more data that's not on this report because I haven't access to the account, and that is actually the problem. We'll get to that in 1 second, but it does have to do with language targeting and the like. So spot on. Let's move along here. Impression share. Personally, I view impression share as being important. It's basically a kind of a measure of of the total volume of searches of the keywords that you've indicated interested in terms of like the locations and types of keywords that you're interested in. How much of that share are you capturing? Like, are you capturing the lion's share of available keyword searches for the markets that you're interested in, or is there something wrong? Because Google likes to if it thinks your ads aren't that great, it'll actually pare back and it would prefer not to show your ads if they don't think that they're relevant. And so this particular advertiser has a budget-weighted impression share of 42%, meaning 33% of the time people are searching for the keywords that they're interested in, but the ads aren't appearing because of kind of a lack of budget, and 25% of the time those ads don't show up due to poor relevancy. And so as a result, it's a 42% impression share. Any thoughts on this one, Sam?
So the budget limited impression share is always interesting to me. I like to see. I guess the thing is that you need to know a little bit more about the account in general. Like, is it because there are campaigns that haven't performed too well historically and we've just kind of ramped the budgets down, or is it because we have a strict marketing budget coming from somewhere else, or just it's a long sales cycle, so can't afford really to ramp the budget up? But I mean, essentially, I'd like to boil my campaigns down to the point where I don't have to limit them by budget. I prefer just to have successful campaigns running, and if they're making me money, keep them going. Loss to rank is a little different, so that's something that could be market specific. It could be like a lot of broad matches, and some people have really specific products that are taking up some of that impression share that much more relevant, and you're kind of missing out there, but it's not traffic you need to worry about. So the budget one's just a question I would ask. It really entirely depends on the account and the company, etc.
So Sam, I was wondering if I could get your take on this kind of opinion here. I like to run my impression shares, close to 60, 70, or 80% kind of impression share, like high impression shares. And the reason why is because I'd rather be more picky. So what I mean by this is, like, if I'm only capturing, 42% of the impression share with the budget that I have, I might want to either narrow the the geographic targeting or the keyword targeting parameters to be a little bit more picky and more specific about the types of keywords and like the types of keywords that I'm buying, so that I could be more intentional and like get 60, 70, 80% of my specific these are the keywords that I really want, as opposed to 42% of like a whole pile of kind of potentially broader keywords. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's pretty much exactly how I feel too. So an example would be, let's say you have someone doing research on a product, right? And they get one of your keywords and they're researching it, and then we know that they probably come back through another keyword, which is a more buying focused keyword, and buy the product. If at any point in that cycle of clicking on the two keywords you're not showing up, then you're kind of destroying that whole conversion funnel. So I prefer that if one person's going to see you, they're going to see you a lot of the time, which is why I try and really lower that loss to budget impression share, either by cutting stuff back or getting rid of campaigns that aren't performing well. So I'm pretty much on the same page as you there, Larry. I think that's kind of the way I go too.
Awesome. So our next metric here, it has to do with click-through rate. We said earlier that the quality scores were a little low. So I should go back to that. It was like 2.6 out of 10. And one of the big kind of drivers of quality score is this click-through rate metric, which I think is really an important metric because it kind of gives you a sense for if your ads and your keywords are resonating with your target audience. And so click-through rate is actually a pretty tricky metric to benchmark because when you ask someone what's a good click-through rate, I think the answer is it depends on your average position and sort of because like obviously higher, more prominent ads are predisposed to getting higher click-through rates. Similarly, it's also difficult to know, how is your click-through rate because it's not really known. Like people don't generally know off the top of their head what's a good click-through rate in average position 2 or average position 3, etc. It varies a lot by industry. It varies a lot by your location, etc. And so this is a pretty interesting benchmark report that we put together here. Basically, what it is you can see it's kind of graphing your click-through rate based on the average position. And so you can kind of see how the higher, more prominent ads tend to get higher click-through rates. Each of these green dots on the graph represents one of the top 200 keywords within this particular account. Now, the yellow curve shows sort of what's typical, like what's expected click-through rate at different positions. And so you can see the majority of those dots, those keywords, those green dots on the plot are below that yellow curve. And so they're below kind of the expected average click-through rate for that position. In aggregate, the account seems to have a click-through rate of 1.45 in an average position of around 2.17. So that's a very prominent position in the second spot. But I would say that's a pretty low click-through rate of 1.45, and I think that's kind of reflected in the low quality scores. But I'd love to get kind of your take on this, Sam.
So there's probably two things here. One, how we judge whether our click-through rate is above or below the market, and that's where I look at my quality score for. That they're pretty intrinsically tied together. And the other thing is when I specifically audit click-through rate, the main thing I'm actually looking at is performance against myself. So I'll look historically rather than try and judge like, oh, I wonder if my competitor is getting 1.7% click-through rate. It's kind of something I know I'm not going to be able to figure out. So I like to see, well, at least has my ad testing improved my click-through rate over the last month? Or, if I look at my account a year ago, what's the click-through rate doing? Because if it's way down, then there's probably something going on. I can like search back through the account and work out, okay, where did it die? Was it a new competitor on the market? Which means, maybe they're writing better ads than me. Maybe over time I haven't done any ad testing. And what's happened is someone else has copied my ad and now my click-through rate's gone down. I need to actually get back to writing new copy and putting something fresh out there. So that's where I go with click-through rate.
Cool. So I agree. You can always do better, and looking at your account, just seeing progress in CTR, that's important. But Sam, a 1.45% click-through rates, like just in terms of like all the accounts that you see on average, like doesn't that strike you as being a little bit low for like the number 2 spot?
It's really tricky because actually one interesting thing I've seen is that different countries have wildly different click-through rates. And I learned this when I moved from the UK. So the UK has a crazy good click-through rates. I don't know what it is about British people, but we love Google AdWords for some reason. And so I looked at accounts that I used to manage, and we'd have like average, 8-9% click-through rates. And when I moved to the US, it's like, you're looking at like 1 to 5% depending on the market, depending on the client. And I'm like, okay, so what are we doing wrong? But actually, it's just the like the behavior of different segments of different populations, different people, etc., towards clicking on ads, and it could just be market specific too. So I think you're right that 1.45 looks a little on the low end, and the low quality score would back that up. That Google clearly thinks it's on the low end. It's going to be changed by a number of factors. So how many how many people know about this guy's brand? So if he's not getting many brand clicks, then his click-through rate average is going to be a lot lower too. If it's one of those things where the SEO links are really, really interesting, the organic links, that could affect it too. So I don't necessarily worry. It would probably cause me a little concern at 1.45, just as, hey, let's dig into this a little further. Is it because our positions are low? Is this because in position 1 or 2 we're not getting many clicks at all, in which case I'm going to think about things like ad extensions or rewriting ad copy.
Cool. All right, our next section here has to do with account activity. Now, this is a little unusual as a key performance metric, because typically when you think about AdWords key performance metrics, you think of like click-through rate or quality score or cost per conversion or whatever. Yeah, pick your favorite KPI. But when doing an account audit, I like to include kind of getting a sense for what's happening in the account, recently. Just to get to see, can I get a sense for, are people kind of actively managing the account, or is it on autopilot, or what? And so an interesting way that you can do this if you're an agency or if you're an advertiser looking to see what your agency is doing or whatever, you can use the account history report, sort of the recent change report. And what we're doing here in this report is we're kind of summarizing, the changes in the account in terms of the different types of things that are changing in the account. Like, are you adding new campaigns? Are you adding new ad texts or new keywords? Ad groups, and then kind of aggregating that change history over the last 30 and 90 days for this particular account. It's kind of an interesting report because that's not that easy to get to in AdWords. And then kind of gives you a sense for like how does this activity compare to other small medium-sized businesses like in this particular industry of this size. And so you can see he's a little bit 10 ads, 49 keywords. It's not nothing, so he's definitely doing a little bit of work based on these numbers. But it's if you're spending $2,500 a month, that's still something like $30,000 a year, I guess. Maybe it might be worth doing a little bit more. Any thoughts on either this level of activity, Sam, or just account activity as a KPI in general?
So it's an interesting one. Obviously, when you're managing clients, account activity is actually pretty important, right? Because they're paying you for the service of running their PPC. So if you're doing nothing, then that's kind of a red flag to a client. We typically look through like the change history in AdWords, and if one of our client managers will look through, writing a report, and be like, hey, I noticed you did this. What's up with that? That kind of thing. So we definitely use it at Hannapin as something to like make sure that all the account managers are working in the accounts and getting stuff done. And I think there's another side of that, which is just familiarity with your account. So if you're in it every day, you're aware when things have changed. So it doesn't take you a month to work out that your click-through rates have suddenly dropped because competitors are pushing their budget. You see it that day, and that's one of the big things that is there's like a benefit of hiring an agency in general, but also like if you're just an account always in your account, just making sure that you catch things like that day or the next day as soon as possible.
Totally agree. That's awesome. Okay, so maybe this particular guy, it's not like he's that lazy or anything. He's doing some work, but maybe he could do like a little bit more work, and that would be maybe beneficial just in terms of familiarity of what's going on and stuff. I agree. Let's talk about long-tail keyword optimization. So this is an interesting metric. So remember, we're saying that the click-through rate on this particular account was a little low. So I wanted to diagnose sort of why that click-through rate was a little bit low. And one of the ways we can do this is look at the kind of what types of keywords are being targeted. You know, are you going after kind of those hopelessly competitive and broad terms like translation or something like which would be very expensive for this particular company, you know, like a one-word keyword phrase, or are you targeting like, you know, more specific long-tail keywords like translating, you know, from, you know, French to English or whatever services this company provides. And so what I've done here is I've kind of counted up the impressions like to all the keywords in the account, and then I've done a kind of group by the length of the keyword. So is it a one-word keyword, a two-word keyword, or like a three or longer kind of long-tail keyword? And here I think we might be looking at a little bit of a problem here, and that is that I saw that 70% of the guys' impressions were being kind of impressed towards like translation and stuff like that. And so this is kind of on the lower side in terms of the mix that we like to see. Any thoughts on kind of this KPI or this achievement here, Sam?
So again, it depends on your market, but one-word keywords typically don't perform too well. And normally my guess is that a lot of that stuff's probably broad matches. So that would suggest to me that you almost certainly want to go through this account, do a search term report, spin things out, work out what's coming in on those broad keywords. And again, it would explain the low click-through rate if your keywords aren't as relevant to the long-tail search term someone's probably searching for. So yeah, 2 and 3 is generally what most of my accounts are made up of. I think if you start getting too like far down the rabbit hole, if you get like 5 and 6, that's where you just see all your keywords are low search volume, and that kind of just makes your account not nice to look at and work in. But for sure, if it's all one-word keywords, there's probably something going on where you haven't optimized. You could just pull a pivot table to get this information, so it's probably a little trickier. I don't know if there's something specific in Excel that counts words, but normally what I do is like use a mixture of trim and then replacing space characters with something else and then counting those.
I just count the spaces.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. And moving along to ad text optimization. So here, you know, the click-through rate is based on two factors. It's kind of like, are you picking the right keywords to begin with? And it looked like they were a little bit broad, but are the ads themselves resonating? And so here I'm just looking at kind of like the best ad in the account and looking at the worst ad in the account and looking at kind of the discrepancy in terms of the click-through rates, and also looking at sort of the number of ads in the account. So this particular guy has got around 50 ads in the account, and they're running several ads per ad group. So I think in general he's doing an okay job at trying out different ads. I think I remember seeing that he was doing a little bit of, yeah, see here, 10 and 43 ads in the last 30 and 90 days. So that, I think that's you know, kind of an area that he's actually focusing on. Any thoughts on this KPI, Sam?
So is that live text ads per ad group, Larry?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's good to have for testing. One thing I always kind of notice in accounts is that there are some people who don't pause out their losing ads. So that's something you guys should probably all just go and check. That if you have something set to optimize, you might have already concluded tests, but you get a little overconfident. You're like, well, I've got 3 live ads testing. Actually, Google's already tested that for you, and they're just sitting there getting 1 or 2 impressions of a day or whatever rather than anything important. So I think the number of ads per ad group that are still being figured out, which has the best click-through rate, is an important metric to look at. And the number of active text ads is good if it's 4 and they're fresh ads and they're all testing against each other. So I don't think there's a problem there. Maybe a low number of ad groups if there's just 50 active text ads would be something I would think about.
Cool. So for this best ad, so he's in the first position here, and he was getting a click-through rate of 20.6%. So this wasn't a branded keyword. It was like a translation ad on some keyword that wasn't his brand. But one thing I noticed, it's kind of blurred out here. I have to protect the identity of the user here, but he had internationalized the ad to be like, in the language that it was targeting specifically. So he had like done that in that one particular account, but he had not done it in all the accounts, like in all the campaigns. So that could explain some of the discrepancies, like such a huge discrepancy in terms of click-through rates on ads. Right. So we're almost through the report here. We just talk about landing page optimization, and this is pretty simple. It's just a count of the number of landing pages for this particular business. He's driving all of his traffic to 3 landing pages. Any thoughts on that, Sam?
So I guess this is really specific on your industry. So for this guy, it's probably lead generation, and you almost certainly have less landing pages for a lead gen site than you would for an e-commerce site, for example. I would, as it really isn't that much to get built out, I would probably try and have something tailored to each ad group, so to each set of ad copy in terms of the landing page. So if there's one that talks about, if you have a translation ad group, I'd probably have a landing page which talks about translation where the heading is translation. And it may be a little bit overstated, I think, in PPC, but it's just keeping that conversion funnel nice and smooth. Don't give anyone anything that makes them think twice about where they are or if they're in the right place. So if they see an ad, if they type something about translation, they see an ad that says translation, and they get to a landing page that talks about translation, that's like a perfect route through the funnel. Whereas if one talks about like different speech products or something, then someone has to rethink, like, is that exactly what I was looking for? So as long as those landing pages all line up with the ad groups, it's probably okay. But I think you just want to kind of go through. There's definitely some room to potentially optimize them a little further.
I think at a minimum, because this particular translation bureau does like 6 different languages, like French and German and whatever, and Spanish, like you'd at least want to have 6 landing pages according to the different types of translation services that you offer. Like I think that's kind of really a great opportunity for this company to try to make the landing pages more relevant there by having a few more than 3 offers. Okay, well, overall, that kind of is the summary of this particular account in terms of this first account. And I hope you can see from a high level, at least, how by looking at auditing these various KPIs, you can start to see kind of a story come together. Like, oh, the guy has kind of low quality score. Why does the quality score so low? Oh, well, maybe it has to do with this low click-through rate of 1.45. Well, why is the click-through rate so low? And it's like, oh, well, maybe it's because he's kind of not that active, and the keywords that he's targeting are like very broad and unspecific. So you can see how individually these KPIs are very important, but together they kind of paint a picture of a strategy that you could employ to getting this back on track, because it's still on the lower edge. Like there's definitely room for improvement here. Any final thoughts on this particular account, Sam?
So I think we kind of covered it. I think the key here is going to be language-wise. So making sure you have all your languages segmented in your account, making sure you have landing pages specific to each language, each service you have, and then keywords was obviously the other big one. So just separating out some of those extra broad things and extra broad keywords, and making sure that you kind of split them out and put them in the right place, because that's obviously affecting a lot of other metrics in the account.
Right. Okay, so just to mix things up a bit, we just have one other report to look at. It's a different industry and different size of company. It's a much larger company, or not larger in terms of the company, but larger in terms of the spend. So this company is spending $37,000 per month on paid search. So that's almost $500,000 a year. Not a not a small amount there. And this particular company is a immigration lawyer. So it's a law firm that's doing like immigration services to Canada. That's where I'm from, by the way. So, but I immigrated to the U.S. But basically, the similar kind of report. We don't have to spend as much time on explaining all the different sections, but I wanted to kind of review the results here, at least. So in terms of like waste spend, so this is like the same kind of report, but just a different company here. This guy is actually doing less work than the guy spending the 2,000 the 2,000 euros per month, even though he's spending like 10 times more. He's doing like no negative keyword research in the last 90 days and no negative keyword research in the last month. Any thoughts here?
So I think I'd kind of like to see how many negative keywords he has in total. Maybe he feels like he's already got a pretty good list, but there's a few recommendations. So maybe you'd have something like an overall list of negatives as well. So we haven't really talked about using lists, but that's something I like to use with lawyers I've worked with, and just there's a lot of legal terms and people searching for a ton of different things that kind of get caught up in the broad matches. So having something that kind of covers all different angles and gets rid of those before they even get to your accounts, a good thing. But it kind of shows that probably they haven't been looking at like their search query report, because you're always going to pull out one or two different things if you do. So
one or two different things. I think you have a much higher view of the Google targeting than I do. There's always stuff in there that kind of surprises me, isn't it?
I think I just looked at a Fortune 100 company's AdWords account, and they have like a 10-man team working on it, and it was pretty tough to find them. So there was one or two things in that one for sure that I looked at. But yeah, you're right. It obviously depends on how long like professionals have been working on the account, so how many broad matches you have, etc.
So one interesting note here for audience, the owner of this account, the person who is managing this account, is actually the lawyer himself. So it's the guy who is doing the, so not a full-time search marketer. He's, it's kind of typical story where you have a business and you start, investing a little bit of money on AdWords. It seems to be doing well, so you invest a little bit more in AdWords, and then you get to the point where you're spending $37,000 a month on AdWords, and yet you're not a full-time search manager. Do you see this a lot, Sam?
Yeah, and this is probably like the sweet spot in terms of where our clients come in from around this kind of spend, because once you start to spend like a ton more, you're probably hiring a few in-house people. It makes financial sense. But at this kind of level, you can hire an agency with expertise to manage your account every day, get everything running smoothly. And just looking down this report, I know we took a quick glimpse at it before the webinar here, but there's a ton of optimizations potential, ton of optimization potential in the account, and you could certainly hire an agency to help you with that stuff, and it's probably going to save you a lot of money given you're spending $500,000 a year roughly on PPC at this point.
So interestingly, Sam, I don't think he's doing terrible. Like his quality score here, it's like the other guy was like 2 or something. This guy is like 5.6. His metrics don't seem too far off the curve here in terms of his performance, and what's driving that is a click-through rate here of 3.89 in an average position of 2.4, so much higher than that other guy's click-through rate, like more than almost triple that guy's click-through rate in a lower position. And of course, we're saying that's as you can see by this graph, the click-through rates and seem to be above the expected click-through rates there. Make the case here, Sam. If things aren't horrible, it's not like there's always room for improvement, and he can still, of course, improve, but it's not a train wreck or anything. Why should he rock the boat here and keep optimizing this?
So I think you have to just think in like the most simple KPI you can in terms of the amount of money you're spending on it. It could be one of those things where if there's 20-30% to be improved there, you could save 150 grand a year in wasted spend, potentially just looking at that negative keyword report you had up there. But there's asking why to optimize is kind of a crazy question in PPC, because your competitors are always optimizing too. So if you stop and they keep going, your click-through rate's going to go down. If your ad copy gets stale, if competitors just see that your ad copy is working well and copy it, if someone else comes into the market, if there's new keywords out there, if the shape of the market changes. So here's just one quick example. I used to work for a company where we did broadband comparison, so looking at prices, and it worked like an affiliate. Well, in the UK, people used to call the industry mobile internet when you would have like one of those little USB dongles that connected to the internet. It was kind of a thing that people would use back in the day. And then that changed to mobile broadband as the main keyword. So if you weren't looking and optimizing, you might just think that the market's falling away from you if you don't have someone always there doing the research, adding the keywords, going through the account, making the optimizations. So it's just all those little things that add up. And normally what we see is a PPC account left alone tends to get worse, but a PPC account managed, it might stay the same, and you're wondering what's going on here. But for sure, those ones that are just left alone for a year, you'll notice that every metric is worse the year after. That's just what I've seen in the 2 or 3 that I've noticed.
So speaking of leaving accounts alone, here's kind of a summary of what the guy's been doing. So this guy is spending $500,000 on ads, in his account per year. He's done, 24 keywords in the last month, 3 ads in the last 90 days. How does, any impressions on that there?
So I mean, it's a low number for sure. It looks like he's over the course of 3 months, he's done a decent amount of keyword research, 800 keywords. Especially, I imagine, because this is a lawyer, that the CPCs are probably pretty high. So that 37 grand might even come from like the same number of keywords as the guy before. Just obviously depending on the CPCs, but yeah, over 3 months, it's not terrible. I mean, look, he's done some work in each of those categories, but each month there's definitely some room to work. So that, for example, there's really been no ad testing over 90 days, just 3 ads. That's something that could potentially be like a big win. If you had managed to test, 5 different rounds of ad copy in that time, the improvements to click-through rates, quality score, etc., could all kind of speak for themselves. So it's definitely one of those things you want to look at.
Sure. Just to clarify, readers, our audience, these numbers in terms of like the keyword changes, 24 and 818, that has to do with like either new, edited, or deleted. So like maybe you changed the keyword bid once, well that would register as one, or if you deleted the keyword, that would be another. If you paused it, that would be another. We're just counting the total number of changes, and you can change them in many different ways. So yeah, here's the long tail keyword optimization. In terms of the keyword targeting, like you mentioned, the user was doing a little bit more keyword research than our previous account. And look at the distribution. There's like almost no one-word keywords at all, and it's primarily, like you said earlier, Sam, the 2- and 3-word keywords. Any thoughts on this? Does this look about right to you, or do you think you should be still a little bit more aggressive on targeting long-tail keywords?
It kind of depends on the shape of the market a little bit. So how many impressions are out there for different 2- and 3-word keywords? It looks good to me. I mean, it looks a lot better than the last one we saw in terms of the balance. What do you normally see as the breakdown here, Larry? Like, what does your data tell you is a good level?
Like, so I see key accounts that have like these insanely high quality scores of like 9, like on average across the entire account. And for those, I see that they're about 80% of their impressions are being accrued to long tail keywords. So it's possible. Now, it's definitely a lot of work and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that. That's maybe a little bit of an outlier, but that's as high as I've seen it. And this is kind of more in the middle. So yeah, ad optimization and landing page, it's pretty typical. It's 54 landing pages. I mean, that's a decent amount for a lawyer. Any final thoughts about this account? Because I think we have to go back to the presentation here. Did you have any other thoughts about this guy's account?
I think just these little thumbs up, thumbs down that you have on the bottom of the report here, these are actually like a lot more important to an account than maybe we've kind of talked about on looking through them right now. So these are a lot of things that I really like to dig into. So things like bid adjustments by device, geo, day parting, they can all make a big difference in the long run. Obviously the network targeting, so it looks like does that thumbs down mean they're running search and display in the same campaign, or does it mean that they don't have one?
It means that there's one or more campaigns in this account is targeting both.
So that's a pretty simple optimization. It's just because of where you spend your budget, because probably your display is more about getting impressions out there and getting people to hear about you and your service, and those keywords are probably much more direct in terms of bringing people in. So I would never want to share my budget between a search and display campaign. So that's something pretty simple you could do right there. And then, so it looks like it says that there are ad groups in there that aren't running multiple text ads. So pretty simple thing as well to optimize. And then ad extensions at the bottom not running, so that's huge. One of the simplest improvements I often make in accounts, like when I get them, the thing that helps the most is just to set up like a fully coherent site link strategy. So that's always the first thing, and then obviously call extensions is going to be important for a lawyer as well. So those are things that are going to be like really important to look at, and especially with enhanced campaigns, looking at things like ad group level site links, making them as targeted as possible. That's where I'd go for sure.
Okay, I agree. So let's just get back to the presentation here. So I'll just try to summarize kind of what we're talking about here today. In doing your PPC optimization, I think you got to know where your metrics are in order to know like how you stand, in order to know if it's doing good or not. And so that's kind of one of the benefits of doing this AdWords audit. This is it's pretty straightforward stuff. I wanted to make this a little bit more concrete in terms of like rather than just giving you some please optimize your account generic kind of platitudes. I wanted to make this real. So we've always suspected here at WordStream and Hennepin Marketing, we've always suspected that doing a periodic account audit is helpful and that it can improve your account metrics. Intuitively that makes sense. But I wanted to know, like, really, like, does it really make a difference? And so what I did was I looked at about a couple thousand AdWords accounts who had run this particular audit. So like the slides that we were showing today, that's the free AdWords grader that you can get from Hennepin Marketing, from ppchero.com or from WordStream.com. But basically, we've got tens of thousands of people running that grader, and so I wanted to see kind of if having run an AdWords audit, does that actually impact the future performance of the account? Because like this is a free service that you can use, and you don't have to become a WordStream customer or a Hennepin Marketing customer. Like, it's a free tool. And so what I did was I looked at people who had done 2 or more grader runs, meaning like they've graded their report once in January and once in March or something. Like, the point is I need to have 2 grader reports so like I can kind of see like how the thing changes from A to B. Like like did it have an impact? And so it turns out like there was about 3,500 accounts that I was looking at representing about 100 million in ad spend who had run the grader twice. On average, the distance between the first and the last run was 119 days. And so what I noticed was the following 3 trends: that the account activity goes up by 28%. So, by seeing kind of where the low-hanging fruit is or where to focus on, I think that kind of motivates you a little bit. A little bit how my Fitbit kind of tells me like how many steps I've done today or whatever, and how good that is. It's kind of motivational. It also, on average, you'll see improvements in your click-through rate and your quality scores. Modest high single-digit improvements. But I think that's pretty impressive for a period of 119 days. And so, I certainly would encourage you to go to either ppchero.com or wordstream.com and run the free AdWords grader. And that's kind of the benefits that you could like to see on average. At this point, I would like to just open the poll question. Meg, are you still there? Great. So the offers, special offers that we have for our attendees today, one is a free trial of WordStream, and you can, that's like a PPC management software that you can use to self-manage your accounts. It has this thing called a 20-minute PPC workweek that kind of shows you, you know what you should be focusing on, and it gives you helps. Sam, do you want to talk about the offer from Hennepin Marketing at all?
Sure. So if any of you guys are kind of in the same boat as that second account we looked in, where you're starting to ramp up your PPC spend, you're spending over kind of $20,000 a month, then we offer a free solutions blueprint. So our senior digital advisor will look in your account and make recommendations, and it's kind of a list you can take away with you, and it's kind of like a mini audit that we'll provide for your account. So people are pretty happy when they get them. There's no obligation with them or anything, so definitely recommend you get one of those for free.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think if you were going to get a free AdWords audit, there's these guys at Hennepin are they know their stuff. I've been reading their blog since 2007, so that's quite a while, and I think whenever you have someone else look over your work, even if you think it's like awesome and can't get any better, you'll be surprised. There's always dozens of things and ideas and other perspectives that could be helpful and very very valuable. So I have no problem endorsing that one. All right, so I think we kind of went a little bit over time, but Meg, do we have any time for like one or two questions maybe?
Yep, I think we've probably got a couple of minutes. So let's see.
And by the way, here's the links for the different offers and our contact information if you have any questions. And if you have any questions, you can just type them into the window right now.
So I have a question for you, Larry. Someone wants to know if they are testing two different landing pages for the same ad, is that going to negatively affect the performance of the account since they have two duplicate ads? I assume they're probably thinking about quality score and that kind of thing.
No, it's not going to make a difference. Like these little short-term tests and that kind of stuff, it does not materially impact your quality score in the long run. Do you agree?
Okay, so here's a good question about quality score and optimization. So where do you focus first? Do you typically go for low click-through rate, low quality score, or for high spend, high conversions?
Well, so where to focus? So it depends on the account. Believe it or not, a lot of businesses don't even have conversion tracking on, or they don't have a good handle on return on ad spend kind of metrics. If that's the case, of course you have to find like low click-through rate, low quality sort of type of keywords to focus on. But if you have those other kind of revenue metrics or cost per conversion metrics, like that's a good place to start. Any thoughts on that one, Sam?
So one thing I like to do is I pull a pivot table, basically campaign by campaign, and I will show the impression weighted quality score of each of the ad groups. So ad group is one of my pivots. And then if there's one or two ad groups in there that look like they're in the wrong place, so say my like everything's 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, and then there's one or two that are like 2 or 3, then that's like a red flag. So I'll go through the whole account and pull out all of those ad groups and then sort them by the highest spend and then work through them that way. So there's probably something we can do. Either the ads aren't right or Google thinks the landing page isn't appropriate for that keyword. And that's how I typically like start my optimization. So it tends to be with the problem children rather than the high spend stuff. But then I also, if there's any keywords that are super important to my account, I'll spin those out into what I call like top performer ad groups or campaigns and give them like one keyword to one ad to a specific landing page. I mean, not all accounts are going to have a profile like that where that's a way to do it, but for sure, if you do have keywords that are super important to your profit or whatever, then I like to keep them in their own bucket. I got another quick question, Larry. So when is the earliest we should start optimizing an account?
Well, that has to do with the impression volume, right? So, if your ads aren't getting any impressions, then it doesn't make sense to optimize. And the threshold is pretty low. Google can actually evaluate the quality score of an ad within 200 impressions. So, I think it's less of a kind of a I think the factor should be less about what's the earliest you should optimize. It's like more about just making it regular. So whatever that interval is for you, whether it's like once a month or once a week, depending on the size of your account, I think it's important to just have a certain rhythm and workflow and just keep at it because it's kind of more of a marathon. Any thoughts, sir?
So I think from day one, pretty much. I mean, it's different things you're working on, you're optimizing. So like as soon as you start, you're looking at your landscape, so where your bids are, where your click-through rates are, and you kind of work from there. But there's a couple of posts on PPC Hero which are like the ultimate guide to your first 30 days of account management or something. And I think there's like a post that's the first day and then the first 7 days and the first 30 days and kind of walks through it. But as far as we're concerned, like day one, if it's an existing account, we tend to spend a little more time analyzing for the first week or two. But that's kind of my take on it anyway. The more, the better. So this is an interesting one, Larry. So I know you guys at WordStream have a new tool, but what's the best way to optimize a landing page?
Landing page. Gosh, there's all this stuff that happens before the user even hits that landing page, which I find is generally pretty. Okay, here's a crazy answer here. I mean, yes, you read all these stories about changing the button colors and adding form fields or whatever. The best landing page optimization tactic I would suggest is trying out like different offers or different flows. So, for example, like WordStream, where we sell PPC management software, you can either run the grader or the trial, and so we wanted to see like, should we be pushing people to audit their account first, or should we be pushing them to do a free trial, and you just actually changing the flow, like oh, let's make this optional, or let's make this let's not even promote this trial or whatever. Like the biggest wins in landing page optimization, in my opinion, happen when you're not just doing on-page tweaks, but actually like radically changing either the offer or the flow of things. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think so when people talk about optimizing a landing page, there's kind of two things. One is optimizing for your customers. So you make more sales, you can bid more because your CPA comes down. That means you're probably going to get higher click-through rates because you're getting better positions, you're getting more clicks through. The other is optimizing for Google, so making sure Google thinks in that little speech bubble that pops up when you hover over your keyword that your landing page relevancy is good. So that's just having good content that's relevant to your keyword, having a landing page that loads quickly, that kind of thing. So there's two ways to think about it. Generally, I prefer to make more sales than to worry too much about Google, but that's the way to think about it. Then I think we've got two more questions here, Larry. We'll try and speed through them. So one person was wondering how to decide between hiring Hanapin or WordStream to assist with account management. So I'll answer for us real quick. So if you're spending over $20,000, that's where you come to Hanapin. We tend to work with like enterprise level clients. And then Larry, if you want to talk a little bit about WordStream.
Yeah, we work with smaller businesses, like more modest spend ranges, like like that first account spending around $2,500 a month. That's more our sweet spot.
And then we have one final PPC-based question. So, if I use phrase match keywords for long tail campaigns, should I create duplicate ad groups for plurals?
Do you want to take that one?
Sure. So. I tend to use, so I used to use plurals a lot. Since close variants have come into AdWords, I normally stick with that and then audit it about once a month. So I'll run a search term report and then pivot my data and show like exact close variant, phrase close variant. And you can just you can pivot by match type to get that. And then I'll see if there's a big difference between the CPA. And if there is, then I'll think about spinning out plurals into their own ad groups or own keywords. But otherwise, I'll just leave them as close variants.
Yeah, I think it used to matter a lot, and now it's just mattering less and less as the match types are kind of converging a little bit. Cool. All right, so thanks again for everyone for joining us today. That concludes our webinar. Thanks Sam for having me, and that's great.
Cool. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, guys. Bye.